Do not blink right now because the moment you are about to step into is not just another headline. It is the exact second everything began to fall apart in a way no one saw coming. And if you stay with the story until the very end, you will uncover what really happened behind the silence. So make sure you subscribe right now and stay with every word because this one changes everything. It started with something so small that most people almost missed it. A quiet deletion. Not announced. Not explained. Just gone. Every shared post between Kai and Tan Songyun vanished one by one, as if they had never existed. No captions left behind. No traces. No sign that anything had ever been there. At first it looked like a mistake. A glitch. Something temporary. But as the minutes turned into hours, the reality settled in. This was intentional. This was deliberate. And that was when everything began to shift. Fans noticed immediately. Screens refreshed again and again. Profiles checked from different accounts. Comments flooding in faster than anyone could keep up with. What happened? Why now? What does this mean? The questions came faster than answers. Because there were no answers. Only silence. And silence can be louder than anything else. On the other side of the city, away from the noise and the speculation, Tan Songyun was nowhere to be seen publicly. No posts. No statements. No reactions. Just absence. But absence does not mean nothing is happening. Sometimes it means everything is happening at once. The truth of that silence was hidden in a quiet corner of a set that had long gone empty for the night. The lights dim. The space still. The echoes of earlier activity fading into something almost unreal. That was where she was found. Not by cameras. Not by reporters. But by someone who had not expected to walk into a moment that would later feel impossible to forget. Tan Songyun sat there. Still. Not performing. Not pretending. Just existing in a moment that felt too heavy to move through. Her eyes distant. Her expression unreadable at first glance. But the stillness around her said everything. Because stillness like that does not come without something behind it. There were no dramatic movements. No visible breakdown. No words spoken. Just a quiet release that did not need to be explained. Because sometimes emotion does not explode. It settles. It lingers. It shows itself in the smallest ways. A glance downward. A breath held longer than usual. A silence that refuses to break. And in that moment everything connected. The deletions. The silence. The absence of explanation. It was not just a digital change. It was something deeper. Something that had already been unfolding long before anyone noticed. Earlier that day, nothing had seemed unusual. Schedules continued. Scenes were filmed. Conversations happened as they always did. Everything looked normal. But normal can be misleading. Because what people see is not always what is happening. And what is happening is not always ready to be seen. Kai had made his decision quietly. No announcement. No preparation. Just a series of actions that spoke louder than any statement ever could. One post gone. Then another. Then all of them. As if he was erasing something that had once meant everything. Not out of anger. Not out of impulse. But with a calm that made it feel final. And that is what made it harder to understand. Because final decisions rarely come without a reason. But this one came without explanation. And that created a silence no one knew how to fill. Back on the set, Tan Songyun remained still for a long time. Not because she did not know what had happened, but because she did. And knowing is sometimes heavier than not knowing at all. The weight of it did not show in loud ways. It showed in the quiet. In the way she did not reach for her phone. In the way she did not try to confirm anything. In the way she simply sat there as if the moment itself needed to pass before she could move again. Because some moments cannot be rushed. They have to be felt completely. Before anything else can happen. Time moved slowly. Or maybe it just felt that way. Because when everything changes at once, even seconds feel longer. Eventually, she stood up. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. Just enough to shift from stillness into motion. But even that movement carried something with it. Not hesitation. Not confusion. but understanding. Because deep down, she already knew what the deletions meant. Not just the action itself, but what it represented. And that was the part no one else could see. The story did not end there. Because stories like this never do. They continue in the spaces people do not notice. In the moments that happen away from everything public. Later that night, her phone lit up. Not with messages from fans. Not with questions. But with something else. Something that made her pause again. A name. Familiar. Unexpected at that moment. She looked at it. Not reaching immediately. Because some moments require a second before they are faced. But she answered. Not because she was ready. But because she knew avoiding it would not change anything. The conversation that followed was not loud. Not filled with explanations. Not something that could be easily understood by anyone outside of it. But it mattered. Because sometimes what is said in private carries more truth than anything shared publicly. Kai spoke first. Not with emotion that demanded a reaction, but with a calm that made everything feel heavier. He told her that what he did was not sudden, not impulsive, but something he had been thinking about for a long time. And that was when everything became clearer. Not easier, not better, but clearer. Because clarity does not always bring comfort. Sometimes it simply removes the questions and leaves the reality. Tan Songyun listened, not interrupting, not reacting immediately, because she understood that this moment was not about responding. It was about hearing, understanding, accepting. The call did not last long, not because there was nothing to say, but because everything that needed to be said had already been felt before the words even began. When it ended, the silence returned. But it was different now. Not empty, not confusing, but complete. The story does not end with a dramatic conclusion. It does not end with a public statement. It ends with something far more powerful. A quiet understanding that something has changed in a way that cannot be undone. And now the only question that remains is this. When something meaningful disappears without warning and the truth arrives quietly instead of loudly, do you hold on to what used to be? Or do you accept that some endings are meant to happen without explanation? If this story pulled you in and made you feel every moment, make sure you subscribe right now, like this video, and share it with someone who understands that the most powerful stories are not always the loudest. They're the ones that unfold in silence and stay with you long after they're over. The moment the call ended, it should have brought some kind of closure, some clear answer that settled everything. But if you stay with this until the very end, you're going to understand why what happened after that night between Kai and Tan Songyun was not about fixing what was broken. It was about facing something that had already been decided long before anyone noticed. The silence that followed was different. Not confusing, not uncertain, but heavy in a way that felt final. Tan Songyun did not cry the way people expected. Not loudly, not dramatically, because sometimes the deepest emotions do not show themselves in obvious ways. They settle, they stay, they become part of the space around you. She placed her phone down slowly, not because she had nothing left to say, but because she understood that everything that mattered had already been said. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. Enough to understand what the deletion really meant. It was not anger. It was not a sudden decision. It was distance, a quiet step away that had been building over time. Back on the other side of the city, Kai stood alone. The calm he showed publicly was still there. But now it carried something else. Not regret, not doubt, but weight. Because even when a decision is right, it does not mean it is easy. He looked at his phone again. The same screen that had once been filled with shared moments now empty. And for a second he hesitated. Not about what he had done, but about what it meant. Because removing something does not erase it. It only changes how it exists. Days passed, and the world outside grew louder. Questions spread. Speculation intensified. Everyone trying to fill the silence with their own version of the story. But neither of them responded. Not because they did not see it, but because they chose not to be part of it. Because some stories lose their meaning when they are explained too much. The real shift happened quietly. Not in public. Not where anyone could see. But in a moment that felt almost too simple to matter. Tan Songyun returned to the same set. The same place where she had been found before. But this time, she did not sit. She stood. Not in the same stillness. Not in the same weight. But with something different. Something closer to acceptance. Because understanding changes how everything feels. She no longer questioned why. She no longer tried to replay every moment. Because she already knew. Sometimes things end not because of one moment, but because of many moments that slowly create distance. Kai moved forward in his own way. Not forgetting. Not ignoring. But allowing the decision he made to remain what it was. Final. Not harsh. Not dramatic. But complete. The final moment between them did not come with a reunion. It did not come with a dramatic confrontation. It came quietly, through one last message. Not long. Not emotional. Just simple. He told her that what they had was real, even if it did not last, even if it could not continue, and that it mattered. That was all. No apology. No attempt to go back. Just acknowledgement. And sometimes that is the most honest ending. Tan Songyun read it. Not with surprise. Not with pain. But with clarity. Because she understood now. Not everything needs to be held on to. Some things are meant to be experienced. Felt. And then let go. She did not reply immediately. Not because she did not have words. But because she no longer needed them. When she finally did, it was just as simple. She told him she understood. And that she hoped he would find what he was looking for. No questions. No expectations. Just closure. And that was the moment everything truly ended. Not when the posts were deleted. Not when the silence began. But when both of them accepted it. The story does not end with a dramatic twist. It does not end with something shocking. It ends with something real. Two people choosing to move forward. Not because they stopped caring, but because they understood that holding on was no longer the right choice. And now the only question that remains is this. When something meaningful ends quietly, without explanations that satisfy everyone, do you keep searching for answers? Or do you accept that some endings are meant to be understood rather than explained? If this continuation made you feel something real and you want to see more stories like this, make sure you subscribe, like this video, and share it with someone who understands that the most powerful endings are not always loud. They're the ones that happen quietly and stay with you long after they are over.